Over the years, we've seen a lot of different interpretations of the Green Goblin and Norman Osborn, some going the route of the Green Goblin formula making him evil, and when he's not on the stuff, he seems to be a pretty decent and normal dude. Ultimate Spider-Man doesn't take that route at all. As a matter of fact, it stays more faithful to the Ultimate comics that it's based off of, as Norman Osborn is evil to the core from the jump in that book. But even still, I wasn't quite prepared for just how crazy Norman Osborn would be in this show, and just how insane he would be as the Green Goblin. And you know what else would be insane? If you were to like and subscribe to this video. Now, before we talk about Norman as the Green Goblin, I think it's very important that we get a good understanding of who Norman is as a character prior to becoming the Green Goblin. His entire motivation throughout the first season of Ultimate Spider-Man is to build his own spider army using Spider-Man's DNA and powers that he can sell to the highest bidder so that he can make as much money as possible. That's all Norman really cares about throughout a majority of this first season. And we see this especially within his interactions with his son Harry. Much like from the 2002 Spider-Man movie, he very much isn't that proud of his son. He sees him as lazy, and nothing Harry does will ever impress his father, unlike Peter. He very much seems to favor Peter, and that's shown through the first interaction we see between these three characters. But that doesn't mean he's necessarily heartless about his son. When he finds out that Spider-Man is at the same high school as his son and that Otto sent villains there to collect DNA from Spider-Man, he gets viscerally upset at the idea that Harry could potentially be injured with all of these villains running around the school and attacking. Now, of course, this could partially just be Norman putting on a show so that people think that he cares. For example, he's very over the top and animated when Harry's hurt in front of all of his classmates and at the school, and he very much plays the role of being that good, gentle, caring father that wants to get his son checked on and make sure that he's okay. But as we'll see with another incident revolving Harry and hospitals later in the season, I don't think Norman cared as much about how Harry was doing and more about the public appearance of him being Norman Osborn and wanting to check on Harry. This entire first episode does a really good job of setting up the idea that Norman is a sleazeball, not to be trusted, and that he isn't a very good person. And we see that come to fruition with all of the genetic experiments he does once he finally gets a sample of Spider-Man's blood. His goal is ultimately still the same, to make that crazy spider army he's so desperate for. And he gets his old colleague and somebody he considers a quote-unquote friend. He views their relationship as being friendly. Otto, not so much, something we'll talk about a little later in the video as well. But Otto's solution is to come up with the symbiote, because why make a bunch of people have to be clones of Spider-Man in order to have your army, when instead you could create a suit that bonds with the person, gives them the power of Spider-Man, and have the ability to be able to take it away whenever you want to. That's a genius plan. Except for the fact that it goes horribly wrong because the symbiote, desperate to get back with Spider-Man, breaks containment, leaves the lab, and ultimately tries to go crash a party that once again endangers his own son, since Peter decided to attend Harry's party. And he doesn't really seem to care that much that his experiment attacked his own son. As a matter of fact, he is beyond elated to find out that it did such a wonderful job fighting Spider-Man and his group of heroes that S.H.I.E.L.D. has employed. He only keeps up the facade with his son in public that he was concerned and worried. We get a lot of mask-off moments with Norman where we see him at the end of episodes, especially with Dr. Otto Octavius, where he's really not trying to hide just how much of a terrible person he is. And it doesn't help that when his son gets the symbiote and starts going around being the Black Spider-Man, Norman doesn't even bother to check up with his son, like, at all. As a matter of fact, his son was actually the one who was trying to tell Norman that he had the black suit, and Norman was repeatedly brushing him off. As a matter of fact, Harry felt like, because of the lack of attention and affection from his father, and the fact that he felt like nothing he did was right or could get his father's attention, he purposefully bonded with the symbiote, tried to enslave it as best as he could, and ultimately that turned him into Venom, which completely defeated the purpose of what he was trying to do, which was impress his dad by being a hero like Spider-Man, who his dad is obsessed with. And Norman, at the end of the day, blows his kid off, doesn't care about hearing from him, and instead is just so overcome with how awesome Venom was. Little devil's advocate here, how is he supposed to know that Harry has the symbiote? I don't know, maybe check in on your kid every once in a while. As a matter of fact, once Harry kicks the symbiote the first time, a little piece of it stayed latched to him and would repeatedly make him Venom throughout the rest of the first season. And when Norman finds out that Harry is Venom, he couldn't be more excited. As a matter of fact, he doesn't want to separate his son from the Venom symbiote. He wants to study him, make him the ultimate weapon against Spider-Man. He was so unbelievably elated to see his son being Venom, he even lets himself get decked because he was so happy. Like, this is the first good thing Harry has ever done for him in his life.
Harry, what have you... My boy.
I think what kind of peeves me the most about this is he doesn't bother to check in with his son. He doesn't give his son the emotional availability that Harry desperately needed so that he wouldn't end up in a situation like becoming Venom. And ultimately, when Harry ends up in the hospital, he couldn't care less about his son. He was more excited to have a vial of his son's blood to give to Otto to hopefully replicate more symbiotes. That's all he cared about, was making this spider army to get money. But hey, I hear you. I know what you're thinking. Especially in this economy, we all got to get our bread. We all got to find our money, right? Maybe he's, treats Otto Octavius decently. This is the man that actually sees Norman for who he is. He doesn't have to fake a personality with Otto. Otto gets the true version of who Norman is. Maybe he's chill with him. The answer to that is no. As a matter of fact, he really rags on Otto and puts him under so much stress that anytime Otto fails, he crashes out. Like, for example, when he hired Taskmaster and Taskmaster failed to get a sample of Peter's blood, so Otto just completely trashes his lab because he knows the consequences from Norman Osborn are horrific. Let's just go through them, for example. Like later in the season, when Otto is actually able to successfully capture Spider-Man after Norman berates him for using goons and thugs to try and get Spider-Man, and Otto actually successfully catches Spider-Man, much to Norman's surprise, he demands that he immediately run tests, immediately gets all of the samples he needs from Spidey, and when Otto fails to do this in a timely manner and Spider-Man inevitably breaks out because this is Spidey's show, Norman decides to just blow up the entire lab Otto Octavius is in because he is sick and tired of Otto's failures and he doesn't want any of this tracing back to him. So he blows up the entire lab, which houses one of his lifelong friends, quote unquote friends, in Otto Octavius. And so, to Norman's complete and utter shock, when Otto, a few episodes later, unbelievably pissed, decides to steal Tony Stark's tech, send an Iron Man suit after Norman, and when that fails, steal Tony's arc reactor specs, build his own arc reactor, build his own Otto Octavius Iron Man suit, and attacks Norman, attempting to expose him. And the fact that Otto isn't dead, yes, Norman has been keeping this man in a basement locked, working on projects, pretending to the rest of the world that Otto is dead so that he can work for Norman on some slave labor shit. And honestly, Norman the whole time is like, well, dude, I thought we were friends. Why are you attacking me? And at the end of the episode, this is after Norman fired him, by the way, because Norman did fire him. He then revives Otto, puts him in a tank and says, you know what, I'll keep you in this tank and maybe you can be useful again. Look at what you did with the Iron Man suit. He fired the dude at the start of the episodes because he didn't value him. He wasn't being useful enough in capturing Spider-Man.
Welcome back to the family, Otto. We have plenty of work ahead of us.
And now I've just ranted about how terrible Norman Osborn is for the last 8 minutes. His neglectful fathership, his lack of care for any sort of ethics, his hatred towards even what are supposed to be his own friends. And I did all that to say that I think this characterization of Norman Osborn is fantastic, and I love it. He is a sleazy billionaire who's after making a quick buck, and that's all he cares about. And I absolutely love that for a starting point for Norman Osborn. I have always loved the idea that Norman Osborn's transformation into the Goblin wasn't some sort of thing. The serum didn't make him evil, it just exposed what was always there, what had already been there, which is Norman is this horrible guy, and he finally gets to act on his horrible wants and needs without reservation because he has the powers to back it up now. He is this twisted inversion of Spider-Man. And that's part of what I loved so much about this version of Norman, is he is unabashedly evil to start the show. And it only gets worse when he kidnaps Spider-Man again, and we see what Otto Octavius looks like now that Norman has hooked him up to a bunch of wires, keeps him in a literal ball of fluid so that Otto can't leave or do anything except work for Norman permanently in a state of what Otto describes as pain. And he did all of this just so that he can once again try and replicate some sort of super soldier formula or Venom or whatever it is, so that he can create an army he can sell to the highest bidder to screw over the rest of the world and make a quick buck. Any of this ring a bell at all? Billionaires selling us out for a quick buck? No, me either. And even with Otto once again capturing Spider-Man and desperately trying to make a brand new formula, something that he could potentially maybe use on his own boss, Otto ultimately fails again. Spidey breaks free and breaks the little tube that Otto was being held in, which leaves the man unable to stand. And that's when we get the big reveal, or Peter gets the big reveal, that Norman's the bad guy. Something that the show had been drip feeding Peter throughout the first season, as Norman did a pretty good job of keeping up appearances throughout, but now he's finally going full mask off, and it's really fantastic. I actually did enjoy this moment from the show a lot, as Peter finally has to reconcile with the fact that his best friend's dad and a man that he looked up to for so long really is as bad as he had thought he had been since Otto Octavius's Iron Octopus episode. And it's during Norman's great and big montage where he's talking about how awesome and cool he is and how great of an army he's gonna build with Spider-Man's DNA and powers. And once he reveals who Spider-Man is, nothing can stop him except for Otto Octavius injecting him with a prototype for a goblin serum based off of Peter's DNA.
Oh, Otto. Why? After all I've done for you.
What's so funny to me in this moment is like the genuine shock that Otto Octavius would betray him. He's like so unbelievably blindsided by this. And I love satisfying downfalls for villains with crazy egos, like this portion of the episode for Norman, because he spent the whole series thinking he's above Otto because he has money and he's smarter and all of these other things. But he gets taken down by the very person he looked down upon the most, except it completely backfires because Norman turns into the Green Goblin, and not like a dude in a mech suit, but rather the ultimate version of Green Goblin, who was essentially Hulk, but with pyrokinesis. I don't believe we'll see his pyrokinesis during this first season of the show, as rather he'll stick to more tech-based things, like a gauntlet that electrifies people and things of that nature, but he has super strength. He looks cool as hell, and scary as hell. He kind of reminds me of Etrigan from Batman the Brave and the Bold, that kind of build. And ultimately, it backfires on Otto pretty bad. He tries to enslave Norman as the Goblin, but fails to account for just how insanely strong Norman is, and just how crazy he is. Norman during this first episode doesn't necessarily have full control of his mind. He is a hulking rage monster, a monster that unfortunately the team doesn't really have anything they're equipped with dealing with. Now, as Norman progresses through these last few bits of the episode, he does gain his intelligence back, and what's more scary than a Hulk that is not only intelligent, but has the resources of Iron Man? That is terrifying, and his only goal at this point is to destroy the people that he thinks wronged him, and that would be Spider-Man, S.H.I.E.L.D., and Spidey's entire team, who have shown up at this point to try and stop the Goblin. But it's not going to happen at all, because Greenie over here is far too strong for any of them to deal with. So Peter attempts his usual talk no jutsu, and unfortunately that's not going to work on the Goblin, because he is at the end of the day just Norman Osborn. Another one of the things that I love is the serum didn't make him any more crazy, didn't make him any more destructive than he already was. It just amplified what was already inside of him. And so this left Norman with only one more objective, and that was to get his son back. Now, why might he want Harry back, you might ask? Well, he wants Harry because Harry has the symbiote, and he believes with the symbiote, world domination is within his grasp easily if he can get his son back, because his son is Venom. Yeah, that's all he really cares about his son for. He doesn't actually care about getting his son back. Did I mention this guy was bad and he annoyed me in a good way? Okay, that was a lot. Maybe take a small second to digest this a little. Maybe get some water if you haven't had any today. Maybe if you're enjoying the video already and want to see more from me, you'll consider channel membership or the Patreon down below. You'll be able to see one exclusive video from me each and every month and a whole list of other benefits that I'll shout out at the end of the video, so stick around to find out. Now with our brief intermission over, it's finally time for me to talk about my favorite gags from this episode. One of them would be Spider-Man finding out him and Venom are related, so he has a dream about them at Aunt May's. And the other one is Peter hanging out at Harry's house and his dad just being the Goblin, but just being his regular old suited up self, lecturing them. It's really funny. I loved these two gags. As for Goblin's next appearance in the last episode of the first season of Ultimate Spider-Man, he pretty much stays exactly the same characterization-wise, and he's more or less just looking to get his hands on his son so that he can go throughout enacting his revenge on the world and hopefully getting to take it over, because what supervillain doesn't want those things? And I think this is a good time to take a pause and really talk about Goblin himself and just how well done I think this show actually did at giving us a version of Ultimate Green Goblin. While I don't think this version of Norman is quite as smart as his comic book counterpart from the Ultimate series, I do think that this version of the character does a great job at embodying the physical and financial disparity he has as a character against Spider-Man. Even with S.H.I.E.L.D. backing Peter, Goblin routinely has tech that outdoes Peter's team. As a matter of fact, he hurt Power Man. Almost nobody throughout the entire first season of this show was able to hurt Luke Cage at all. Goblin was able to do that. It's there to show his overwhelming force. This idea that he is this larger than life monster. I really enjoyed that portion of Green Goblin as a character. I really enjoyed Norman's personality throughout this entire show. Just how sleazy and evil he is unabashedly. You know, I love my nuanced villains, but at the same time, I really do think there is a place for just having a bad guy that's a bad guy. And Norman fills that role in the first season of Ultimate Spider-Man very well. I think as an overarching villain, he was great as well. They built Norman up as this threat slowly in the background, and so when he finally goes Goblin mode, it really does feel pretty earned, especially from a show that is mostly slapstick comedy and somewhat episodic, with the team doing different things every single episode. I think having Norman working around in the background the whole time was a really great setup. And it helps that I think his Norman Osborn voice is fantastic, both in Norman and Goblin form. The way that the two blend almost perfectly while he is Gobby, I really enjoyed that as well. It really sells that larger than life monster theme.
Help me. Help me go back to being small and weak? A mere mortal jealous of Spider-Man? A cure? I am cured.
I also love the idea that he's so deluded he believes he is perfect. He's finally hit the apex. This whole time he has been jealous of Peter, and now he finally has the powers to do something about it. He has the power to take anything and everything that he wants. I'm gonna be honest with you, Norman Osborn is so rich. Like, what more could you possibly want out of life? I guess really it just comes down to taking control of everything, because no matter how much Norman has, he was never going to be satisfied. There was always somebody out there with a newer, shinier toy, a newer, shinier power. And honestly, you can kind of relate that to your own life. I know I definitely fall into that trap of, oh, a new shiny thing came out, my friends are getting it, mostly video games. It's like, damn, I gotta get it now. He's never just satisfied with what he already had. Norman already had so much more than everybody else. He was still jealous of Spider-Man. There's a lesson in there somewhere, but I don't think this show was ever going to be smart enough to try and articulate it or really care to. They cared more about putting on entertaining fight scenes and having some pretty decent slapstick comedy. And honestly, I can get behind that. Not every show has to be super serious. Norman, in all honesty, in his Goblin form, is honestly pretty funny. Like, he gets all of his tech, especially in this first season, mostly from stealing it from S.H.I.E.L.D., because as we've seen, Norman, while having money, wealth, and resources, isn't actually very smart. Much to the difference of other versions of Norman Osborn we tend to see, this version really isn't that bright. As a matter of fact, he's kind of an idiot, which leads to the more funny interactions we see where Norman plays the role of rich idiot kind of throughout this show. I feel like that was really exemplified with the fact that he betrayed his only friend and didn't see that friend would eventually stab him in the back for, oh, I don't know, turning him into a slave that can't walk and sits in amniotic fluid. But that's just a theory. But what Norman lacks for in his usual intelligence, he does actually tend to make up for with his ability to manipulate people and to actually put on this really decent facade of being a normal, loving, likable guy. He actually seemed to be able to slip into that role very well, and he even does that so that he can get his son Harry to help untie him. Also, that Norman can put Harry in a stressful enough situation that he can force the Venom part of Harry to come out again. because Norman doesn't even care about his kid. He shocks his kid. He could have literally killed his own son just so that he could get Venom back out and so the two of them could team up, because he doesn't care about anything other than himself and what he can seek to gain. I love that it's consistent and that it never changes between Norman as himself and Norman as the Goblin. This is just the kind of person that he is. And of course, when the plan doesn't go to fruition at all, because this is Spider-Man's show, so he must defeat both the Goblin and Venom at the exact same time, Norman is very quick to cut his own son off. He doesn't even care that Harry is going to be left on a helicarrier to drown after Spider-Man is successfully able to separate Harry from Venom once again. So that just leaves Harry and the symbiote completely separate entities, meaning Harry is unprotected on this sinking helicarrier, and Norman doesn't care. All he cares about is getting the Venom symbiote so that he can give it to somebody else that is more quote-unquote deserving of wearing this magnificent creature. So he's gonna collect the Venom symbiote and leave Harry, and all of that while also insulting his own son because he just doesn't care.
Not fit to wear this magnificent creature on your worthless hide, but I'll find someone who is. Our dance is far from over, Spider-Man. Another day.
I think if you've watched my channel for long enough, you know that any person that is supposed to be in a parental role, not actually taking care of and being a part of their child's life, kind of pisses me off. And this version of Norman exemplifies that trope a lot. And that's part of why I think he's such a great villain to hate. And that's part of the reason I ended up really enjoying this version of Norman Osborn in the Green Goblin. Because if you can genuinely get me to hate the villain, you're doing a fantastic job. And it doesn't help that at the end of the season, Harry blames Peter for all of this. Well, he blames Spider-Man because he doesn't know Spider-Man is Peter. And with Harry hating Spider-Man and Norman out in the wind, that leaves you with the question of where does Norman go next in that second season of Ultimate Spider-Man? Well, you'll just have to stick around the channel and find out. So maybe consider liking the video, subscribing, and maybe even going the extra mile and supporting me as a content creator through the Patreon with the link in the description and the YouTube memberships that I now offer as well. As I mentioned earlier, you'll get one exclusive video each month. And on top of that, there's a Discord where you can talk to people who are also fans of the channel or just interested in comic books in general. Finally, a shout out to my Hall of Fame tier member. Links for all of those will be in the description, and once again, thank you all so much for watching.